What's up, guys? My name is Justin. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are back on iRacing, and today is going to be something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about setups, kind of a basic overview that I kind of use to look for as far as how to not necessarily build a setup from scratch, but if you have a solid baseline or I don't know, even something from seasons past or setup shop or anything like that, how to kind of at least adjust it, fine tune it to fit your driving style, and kind of a walkthrough of a breakdown of what kind of stuff does what and what to look for. So we're going to do one of these for oval, one of these for road. Obviously, this is the oval one. You already know that. But yeah, so anyways, we're going to just kind of go through my thought process here, and I'm going to show you on track kind of what stuff does and talk through it. And then obviously I'll answer questions, whether it be through here, through my Discord. So first we'll just kind of run through what everything is, kind of what it means in terms of handling, what it means in terms of whatever else. Um, so yeah, this is kind of your setup base. This is my 1.5 mile B open base. We're just going to use the Xfinity car because I've driven it the most recently. Yeah, so anyways, tire pressures. Just as a general rule of thumb, this is nothing I'm going to say here is going to be an exact science of forever. Just a kind of general rule of thumb as far as what to look for, what stuff means that you can use and broaden out and learn with. So anyways, so front tire pressure is usually the entry of the corner. The rear tires are the exit. So if you are really, really free on the entry to the corner, you want to worry about your front tire pressures. If you are really, really free on the exit of the corner, you want to worry about your rear tire pressures. Easy enough, right? It gets more difficult, I promise. Anyways, left side tire pressure down is going to be looser. So if you are too tight on entry, you are just plowing. You'd never actually do a jump like this, and I'll explain why later. But if you were just plowing your entry ridiculously and you couldn't get anything else to work, you would go a bunch down on your left front tire pressure. And same if you were plowing your exit, you'd go down your left rear tire pressure. The opposite is true for the right side tires. Your right side tires up is more free, left is tighter, if that makes sense. So if you were really, really tight on entry again, you'd never do this, but you'd balloon the right front tire to be 50 psi, which is insane. But in theory, you could do that. You would never want to do that because then you start messing up your tread wear and stuff here, which we'll talk about later as we go. But that's just something that to keep in mind. So that's kind of tire pressures, a very basic understanding of tire pressures. If I can click on this. Ballast in the Xfinity car, I don't really change too much usually. My base says 28 what's this, inches or whatever, so whatever that means, pounds, whatever. It's the weight in the nose. More of this is a tighter entry and center of the corner, which hurts to get the nose swinging. The reason you might do this is if your car balance is difficult, not necessarily just that you're too tight on the entry or something, but if your balance is difficult, you can move this around some. And it changes the nose weight, the cross weight a little bit, stuff like that. Steering ratio, steering offset, brake bias, 100% preference. As I get more comfortable, I will usually turn this down to help when I am on the brakes, which is very rarely usually in this car. Help it turn some, help the pit road entry, that type of stuff. And then tape configuration. The general rule for tape is 1% of tape is about 2 degrees of heat. So your temperature that you're aiming for is around 260 to 270 degrees running temp. So once you're up to speed running, not one lap where you're flat out, not 100 laps in the race, you don't want to be 70%. That means you're way too hot to start with. 260 to 270 is usually plenty safe. So obviously, if you get damaged, that's something you'll need to change, which you can do in open setup races, thankfully. And then the other thing, brake bias, I forgot to mention, obviously it affects not just your braking, but your rotation while braking. Obviously, if you use a little bit more rear brake and you kind of do a little bit of a brake drag, you can use that to help rotate the car through the corner. Front anti-roll bar, something that I like to do a lot, is this diameter. If you do have trouble on your entry again, it does help with understeer. So a lot of my sets, if you drive my sets, you'll see 1, 2, or even 3 or 4, depending on the track, clicks of front anti-roll bar out of the car. So that's just something that I make note of, as I do quite often. We'll just leave it at that for now. This link slack affects the preload. In general, you want preloads to be nearer to 0, which you'll see here. This one is 3.4 on the rear preload. I'll get to that later. The front is a little bit less important. I'll be honest, I don't really know what this attach is. I've never used this on an oval in my entire life. So I just always have it attached. I honestly don't know. I always use max as well. It's just been a little bit helpful to me. Obviously, going down on this is similar to going down on this. So I just always have run max and then built around that. All right, now we'll get to springs, and then we'll get down to rear anti-roll bar. Well, I guess there's no rear anti-roll bar in this car, but we do have a truck arm preload back here. So anyways, fronts, corners of car and front springs and so on have several different things to look at. Corner weights, ride heights are kind of the things that you're going to keep an eye on as you adjust all of this stuff. Shock deflection, I'm not, again, a shock expert by any means. I don't really pay too much attention to this as long as the thing doesn't drive like a bus. I've never found where this value being vastly different for various settings makes a difference. It's the ride height, the corner weights, your perches, your spring rates, etc. that always adjusts that. The front spring perch, which is this first thing, is your ride height adjustment. So this is going to be very important to seal the skirts, seal the splitter once you've done all the stuff with your spring rate, your shock rate, your packers, your tire pressure, which we'll go back and show in a little bit. All these things, once you get it where you want handling wise, then you want to make sure you're not dragging the ground, which this would be too low for red. Or alternatively, even if it's, it won't let you pass tech if it's too high, but you don't want, 700 tons of air going under the car and messing up your aero. So that's kind of the adjustment right there, is all four corners of the spring perch. Talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. The springs on the front car, the spring rate is kind of the stick for the front of the vehicle. Mechanical grip is better with softer springs. So a lot of times in like the late model, you'll see guys run like 250 left front springs, or maybe even less than that. Sometimes they'll run like a 600 right front spring. It really depends. It's kind of preference based. 300 is what I tend to go with as far as the spring rate on 1.5 mile ovals in the Xfinity car. That works pretty well. The shock spring rate is a similar type of theory. I won't get too much into this because I pretty much run 7,000 across the board on 1.5 miles. I don't really mess with that too much. Along with Packer shims, I've run 1.5 inch shims for a long time, a couple years now. Never had any problems with it, and again, it's kind of a finite adjustment that I don't mess with too much as long as my spring rate and my spring perch is where I want them. Doing things I want them. Shock, compression, rebound, slope, that type of stuff. For a long time on iRacing, I'm not sure, 100% sure if this is still the case. You want all your compression, slope, rebound, all this type of stuff maxed out on pretty much every car. So on late model, sometimes that's 16 or 18. This car, it is 10. The front, I believe it's 10 on the rear as well for everything. So I've never run anything other than that. Some people swear by doing different settings for feel. I have always felt best at 10 across the board for this particular car, or the max across the board. I don't know if it's a feel thing, maybe it's a placebo effect, but I have always found, and it used to be mechanically faster to run max for all these things. That may no longer be the case, but I've never had any problem running max for all the things across the board. Your compressions, rebounds, those type of stuff are just over bumps. How the spring loads low speed, and then HS is obviously high speed. How the thing loads and kind of transcends the length of itself, I guess, is the way you think of it. It's more important in road racing. When you watch the road video, we'll talk a little bit more about curb strikes, unloading, under throttle, under braking, those type of things. But just in general, just know that it's kind of how you approach when the car is loading into a corner or unloading off of a corner, or direction changes, that type of stuff, how the spring reacts to all that. So that kind of how this all is impacting what your spring rate is, what your shock spring rate is. So if you have a really soft spring that unloads quickly, it's going to be, bouncy almost is a good word for it. But a really, really stiff spring that unloads slowly is going to, kind of feel like a dump truck in some ways. So that's kind of a very quick, brief assessment of these clicks of spring, slope, and compression, rebound. Camber is the lean of the tire. If you think about lean in terms of positive being The top is away from the car, so like on the left side tires, that'd be lean to the left. On the right side tires, that would be lean to the right, would be positive camber. On an oval, no, that's not right, is it? You turn left. No, that is correct. I'm sorry. So lean away from the car at the top is positive camber. Lean away from the car at the bottom towards the car, like like a stance car, or whatever, is negative camber. So if you think about an oval here, we have a 6-degree left front camber, which means the left front tire is leaned way over to the left, but the right side tire is also leaned over to the left at negative 3.4 degrees. The reason for that is, of course, when you're on oval, you want both tires to roll over onto the contact patch as you're going through the corner. So although the numbers are one's positive and one's negative, they're essentially leaned the same direction. And if you think about that in a three-dimensional form, it makes more sense than just seeing it on here. Caster is a little bit difficult to explain. That it's how much the steering axis is leaned back positively or forward negatively. More positive casters, more oversteer while steering wheels turned into a corner. More understeer while counter steering and a slide heavier steering wheel. So I run quite a lot of positive caster, excuse me, usually because I don't mind oversteer. That's kind of how I build my cars, is kind of a pivot around the front axle. Loose is fast, but you also want it to be a little bit savable in a slide. So that's just how I do it. There are a lot of different settings for how you may want it. If you don't like a car that's kind of you turn in and the thing jerks, you may run less caster. Um, if you like the car to be really snappy to save it quick, like my buddy Alex Bell does, you may run less caster. Toe in is kind of a similar thing to camber in a way. That's actually the toe, like the front of the wheels or the rear of the wheels being steered toward each other. So toe in is the front wheels are being steered towards each other. Negative toe, which is what you usually run on a stock car, is the wheels are turned away from each other. So obviously it says there you want toe out at the front. Less is better for temperature buildup, but more is better turn in straight line stability. Usually between negative 2/32 of an inch and negative 4/32 of an inch, which is obviously an eighth of an inch, is what I run on mile and a halves in most places, but we're talking about mile and a halves today. So that's what we got here. Like I said, it's basically a feeling of you balance turn in for straight line stability against temperature buildup. You could run, just a ton of left front toe, not that much, obviously you'll fail tech, but 10-30 seconds or so of left front toe, and you'd have killer turn in, but you're going to blow through your tires quickly. So that's kind of that balancing act between 2 and 4/30 negative is usually what I end up running. The rear end is similar. This travel to coil bind is kind of a special thing. I usually don't run any on mile and a halves. It says right here it's only available with spring rates higher than 350 pounds in the rear or at tracks larger than a mile, which this is obviously. So it kind of differentiates the handling as far as the spring setting on a straightaway is the way I understand it. I've never run coil bind on. But the rest of this is all pretty straightforward. The only thing that's different is the track bar and the truck arms, and obviously the rear end gear, which is just to maximize your RPMs at the end of the longest straightaway, obviously. So yeah, it says right there, max RPMs before turn in, pretty straightforward. Rear track bar, your right side being higher is going to be more oversteer. Your left side is going to be more understeer. If your left side is 13, your right side was 6, for example. So when it says that oversteer in general, higher track bar is more oversteer. In left turns, higher right side, which an oval is obviously higher right side than left side, is tighter corner entry, looser corner exit, which I usually prefer to the opposite. Opposite in right turns, obviously road courses, you'll be flat. Legal difference is 3-inch height difference between the right and left sides, which I don't think is quite true. Whatever. Anyway, so I'm just going through the list I made here of stuff on the sets. I think I've covered pretty much everything other than the preloads. I already talked a little bit about the rear end. You want it to be near enough to 0. So once you got done with your set building, you'd want to move that to, for example, -1. That way it would the closest you can get to 0. So obviously, once you get through, if you're adjusting a bunch of stuff, you change all your tire pressures, which I'll give you an example here in a little bit. You'd want to go back in and reset your ride heights to whatever you determined you've wanted, usually as low as possible on both the fronts, but specifically the left front. And depending on the track you're at, sometimes you do want downforce. You'll put the rear end up in the air a little bit with the spoiler, just, maybe a tenth of an inch, 2/10 of an inch, just a little bit to give you a little bit more stability with the arrow. But usually don't mess with that too terribly much. So we're going to go out and run a little bit, a lap or two here around Las Vegas with this base kind of set, which I think was built for old Atlanta, actually. It's a couple years old now, but we'll just go in. I'll talk a little bit about what the car is doing, and then we will go in and make a couple of adjustments, and I will show you kind of what that changes, how that works, what that feels like based on my couple of adjustments I'll make in my feelings. So we'll just roll on track. I'll shut up and let you listen to it, and then we'll go back and I'll explain what's kind of being felt and what we're going to change. The other thing to keep in mind when you're building a set or tweaking a set is you don't want to go flying off, do a burnout, whatever. You want to try to come to a nice slow stop, not lock up the tires, not slide them, anything like that. Just to get as accurate of a temperature reading and a wear reading on your tires as you can, which we'll look at right now real quick. And then I'll talk about kind of why my laps were terrible. But anyways, so we see here even wear across the right side tires. That's good. We only ran 2 laps, obviously. But for example, if this was extrapolate here and this was like 90 and these were like 95, you might think that you have too much left side wear here and you might want to try to lean this tire back because you have a little bit too much left side camber perhaps. So you maybe want to make this left front, 5.8 degrees and then go back out, run the same mile laps and see if that helps a little bit with this tire wear across the board. Anyways, what I felt there was that my entry was a little bit too tight and my exit was a little bit too snappy. So some of the adjustments I might make here, just for an example, we'll go with 26 psi. So we went down a psi on this, which will also help this middle wear because you're kind of straightening out the inflation a little bit. Think of it like a balloon. If you let some of the air out, it's going to become less circular, obviously, right? More squishy in the middle. This is the simple way of thinking about this. We're also going to go down and click on the front anti-roll bar. Again, this is one of my preferred adjustments. There isn't really a big downside to it if you can control what the adjustment does. But yeah, so I usually like to go down this just to help my entry just a little bit. Let's see, and I mentioned being slightly free on exit, just trying to get on the power. So this is a rather big adjustment. A spring is a pretty big adjustment, but we're going to go down to 675 on that. Now notice that did mess up my front ride height in the left front and my left front camber. This is a cross weight thing, so this did adjust the cross weight here. We'll just go back and look real quick at what my corner weights are. They're 907 and 947 here. Go down 25 pounds on the spring. Now we got 944 and 903. So we lost about 3 pounds on each of those. And just something to keep in mind, it did affect the balance and the cross weight and the preloads and that stuff just a little bit. So again, you might want to reset this preload here for the meantime, but we are going to have to adjust it again after we adjust this camber down to make it pass tech. There, got one click down to that. Still a little bit too high on my left front, so we'll click that back down. I think we were at 4.508 earlier. It's not an exact science as far as getting the same usually, but it's good enough. Again, so this preload, is a little bit too high. We'll just click it down to get a little bit closer to 0 on the rear end. Everything passes. Again, you can just kind of save it. Cool. We're done. We ran 31:21 last time. I wasn't exactly running hard or anything, but just for the sake of showing you the difference here, we'll go back out. We'll run 2 more laps and explain kind of what that difference is. So with the left front tire pressure adjustment, obviously hotter pressures are in the zone quicker. Higher pressures, excuse me, are hotter and in the zone quicker. Lower take a little bit longer to come in and build temp, build pressure. But 1 pound on one tire shouldn't make too big of a difference. But with that front ARB, we should have a little bit of turn in. Went down on the right rear spring, which is the biggest spring adjustment you can make. The right rear spring controls a lot of how free the car is, so it should be just a little bit tighter on late corner exit now, a little bit more stable with that less spring travel on the right rear. So we'll just run 2 more laps here, see if I can drive a little bit more aggressively, just kind of cruising again. But if you have a little more confidence and feel, you'll really feel the adjustment there. Yep, so it still a little bit snug through the entry center there. My exit was much more secure. We were able to carry more corner speed there. Same thing down here, see if we can get turned in nicely. Again, still a little bit too tight entry center, but I definitely didn't feel the back end step around quite as much there that time in 3 and 4. We'll run one more just to confirm that. Again, I'm not actually building or testing anything here, but just of note, get the car all set. There we go. Again, still a little bit too tight entry center. Again, we'd just make some more adjustments, maybe change some left front spring offs or spring rate, excuse me. Maybe another click of front anti-roll bar, maybe some more tire pressure adjustments on both left side tires. So there's a lot you can do. It really varies. But that right rear spring change did really help me out on corner exit, so that was a nice change. Pretty big change, but I'm happy with that. Again, same thing. We'll just check, make sure we can come in down here. Slow down nice and easily. Don't want to slide the tires or anything. Have a big black mark line. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay. So again, like I said, tire wear looks good. A little bit more, like I predicted, a little bit more middle tire wear there when we went down on the pressure. Helped the entry a little bit, kind of straighten out some of this camber is good. You don't want it all on one edge of the tire here. Obviously, the middles are the most important, and then usually the lefts. So that's the middle and the left, which obviously is the outside of the tire on the left side, but the inside on the right sides. Makes sense, physics. So what I would do next probably is go something like 26.5, 25.5, try that. Go down another click of the front bar, maybe a little bit more tape to help the grill, help the car handle a little bit. The rear end felt pretty good, so not going to touch any of this stuff right now. But we are going to, again, have to reset this ride height. It's going to be up a little bit more just because of where we have our tire pressures at. But this all looks pretty good, so we'll just go back here one more. We'll check our offset. There we go, just about 0. So this might be what I go out with again for another run and see what we end up with for tire pressures and handling, and do it like that. So it's pretty straightforward as far as kind of what you play with once you know what everything does, which I've listed out in my Discord. Just kind of a very, very basic guide to all of this as far as oval specifically, but it also applies to road, which you can see in the video that'll be coming up after this. So yeah, that's kind of a very basic description. Obviously, if you hover over everything, it gives a very literal technical definition in some ways, which isn't the easiest to understand. So I wanted to make this as kind of my experience with it, and I am far from a professional. I promise you that. I am far from the know-it-all or the brains and genius of all this, but I've been doing it for a little while and have good success with it, and know what most everything does as far as translation onto the racetrack. So I just wanted to make that to be able to help everybody out and kind of understand a little bit of the basics of oval set building, and hopefully it helps moving forward. So see there, we actually ran like the exact same lap, which is hilarious. Uh, that's pretty funny actually. But the second lap was better. Maybe I just drove better. I say the second lap was better. It was better than the second lap the first time. So consistency is just as important as lap speed, folks. Remember that. But so yeah, that's the oval video, and I'll get the road one done hopefully soonly, and it can kind of be our baseline for setup prognosis. So hope you all enjoyed it. Hope everybody learned a little bit of something. If you haven't already, like and sub down below so you don't miss any of the action from iRacing, Acela Corsa, F122, or anything else I may post at any given time. So thanks so much for stopping by, and until next time, as always, bye.